The Boy Scouts of America are dead.
I'm just going to frame it this way. It's taken less than 20 years to destroy over 100 years of a beautiful thing.
Part of my take is, given the climate of the culture today, it's not surprising at all.
Having something specifically for boys, and I also believe having something specifically for girls, is a good thing.
Western societies in particular have long understood the value of both genders, and they actually developed societies to protect that.
The laziness of conservatives who have not fought hard enough for our cherished institutions has caused this. You're to blame. We're to blame.
Good men have done nothing. Hello, and welcome to the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew.
Hello.
Hey, guys.
Our topic for today is not the happiest. The Boy Scouts of America are dead. At least so say we three.
Yep.
The news this past week, we're recording this on May 9th, is that the Boy Scouts of America are officially changing the name of the organization from Boy Scouts of America to Scouting America.
Yeah.
They'd already changed the name of the program to Scouts instead of Boy Scouts.
Well, we're calling it Scouts BSA.
Scouts BSA.
The
okay.
Department of Redundancy Department.
Yeah. All right. Thomas, you're not a Scout.
No.
All right. But Andrew and I, we're both Eagle Scouts.
Correct.
So let's actually start with you, Thomas. Just hearing about this and kind of what's been happening in the news, what do you think about it? What's your first take?
Part of my take is, given the climate of the culture today, it's not surprising at all. It seemingly is inevitable. Everything's kind of going the way of woke. I don't have the emotional connection that you two have to it, obviously, because I think you guys, it was very, very much a part of your life growing up. I never experienced that. I always saw it from afar. I didn't have any negative views of the Scouts. I was never one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think inevitable is probably the right word with how everything's gone. I think for us, Andrew, it's quite upsetting.
Oh, yeah. I'm rather upset.
Yeah. All right. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit of the history of how this decline began?
Okay. I'm just going to frame it this way. It's taken less than 20 years to destroy over 100 years of a beautiful thing.
It was built up over 100 years into something wonderful. We've had presidents of the United States who were Eagle Scouts. Mm-hmm. And then since 2012, pretty much, it's just gone off the cliff.
So in 2012, that's when they decided to allow openly homosexual boys into the Boy Scouts. Now, my personal opinion is that I don't have a problem with that because they are children.
And they're boys.
Yeah. And it's an opportunity to minister to boys.
And get them good role models that might, change their mindset.
I mean, it's the whole point of scouting is to make good men.
Yeah.
And so also, I never believed that talking about sexuality was ever appropriate for a boys' organization, for a children's organization at all.
Correct.
That should never come up. So it was, to me, somewhat of a moot point when that happened. Now, when they added the homosexual leaders, that was a huge schism. And if I recall, that is what kind of birthed the Trail Life USA movement and some of the alternative scouting-like organizations.
Yeah. So just to expound on that for a second, Trail Life USA is a explicitly Christian alternative to the Boy Scouts that borrows a whole lot from the Boy Scouts. And I guess you could say it's part of the same scouting movement that's been international since its inception by Baden-Powell.
That's right.
It was a Boy Scout member who left the Scouts after that decision to form Trail Life, was it not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the history as well. I've got their website pulled up. I can find these answers, I hope. But maybe keep on going a little bit on the history.
Yeah, and so, that created a huge problem for a lot of people, and we saw a whole lot of attrition because of that decision.
And I know it made lots and lots of Scouts mad.
It did. Yeah, it made a lot of people angry. Fast forward to 2019, and this, I don't know if this has caused the greatest attrition, I think maybe so, was allowing girls into the Boy Scouts. That makes a whole lot of sense.
It's in the name.
From that time, I believe at 2019, if I recall, there was something along the lines of 2 million youth members.
Yeah, the number we have is for 2018, and it was over 2 million at that time.
And at this point, it's just over 1 million, and about
Today,
correct. And about 147,000 of those are girls. So they doubled the pool theoretically, but lost 50% of the population. So,
well, more than 50% of the previous population, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I get the argument. And when I was in, there were boys with sisters who wanted to go and do the same stuff too. And that was great. There was later on, we started a venturing troop, which was wonderful. And the sisters joined that and we all had a great time.
Yeah. So the Venture Scouts is a sub-organization within the Boy Scouts that's
co-ed.
separate from the Boy Scout program, but it's co-ed and it's for a little bit older. I think you have to be 13 or something to join.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So newsflash, an organization already existed.
Yeah. If you didn't want to go to the Girl Scouts, you could also go to the Boy Scouts and be a Venture Scout.
Yeah. Or an explorer. And that's a little bit more of a rare thing, but the explorers have been around since the 70s.
Yeah.
And girls could join the explorers and that was fine. So there were options if you wanted to go out and do these high adventure things as a girl.
Yep.
The reason the Boy Scouts exists for boys is because having something specifically for boys, and I also believe having something specifically for girls, the Girl Scouts, is a good thing.
Yeah.
It is healthy. It makes strong people. It teaches each kind of person to be their full self, and as a male or a female.
Yeah. And it teaches you who you are separate from pursuit of the opposite gender.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I want to mention two things about that. One is, for example, with boys in a camping scenario, around a campfire, they're going to loosen up and really lean into being their authentic selves. And I think it's so funny, the new Boy Scout executive is talking about people being their authentic selves. Well, boys can't fully be their authentic selves in the presence of girls.
Yeah.
It's always going to be influenced. And I think that's also true for girls. Girls cannot fully be their authentic selves in the presence of boys.
Right. Yeah. I think that's unequivocally true.
Yeah. There are opportunities for co-ed and learning to live with one another. There's school, there's church activities, there's all manner of things.
There's nearly every organization in our lives today is now co-ed. There's hardly, I can't really think of any organizations that are gender specific any longer.
Yeah. And that's fine, but it's okay to have something that's exclusive.
Yep.
And I wanted to read a little excerpt, and this is from the Girl Scouts website, just to give some contrast here of what they still value in their organization. And I just found it really interesting. So this is from their website. It says, studies show that in co-ed learning environments, boys receive more praise than girls when they call out in class, making girls less likely to raise their hands. Furthermore, boys are allowed to problem solve on their own during class time, which fosters independence, whereas girls tend to step in or teachers tend to step in and help girls, leading girls to question their own abilities. All girl environments, there it is, be they all female sports teams, regular slumber parties, or even Girl Scout troop meetings, work as a type of oasis in her world. When there are no boys to be compared to or compare herself to, she can discover her passions, stretch her limits, and shine her absolute brightest without the social pressures of being seen as too girly, too masculine, or really too anything. Essentially, she's allowed to be herself and learn her own strengths on her own terms. That's wonderful. Why can it not be the same for the Boy Scouts?
Yeah, I agree. There's so much value to boys interacting with boys and learning how to be better men one day when they grow up. And as our coworker who still leads a troop was telling us the other day, now when he goes on campouts where there's more than one troop in the same area, all the older boys run off with all the older girls. And so they have a whole new problem to deal with, and they're not spending time with their own troop because the girl troops and the boy troops are not unified still currently in the new world of scouting. But they are still all in what used to be the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Take a bunch of hormonal teenagers out to the middle of the woods to camp out where, you have to keep an eye on their tents the whole night to make sure they're not sneaking off with one another.
Well, devil's advocate venturing has been a thing, and it was okay. But, Just want to throw that in there.
Well, there was a place to avoid it.
There-
if you wanted to take your boys just as the boys, you had that option. And now that option,
That's
if you're
right.
going to a scouting camp, is not an option any longer.
Yep.
You have to go separate.
That's true. Yeah, there is no longer an exclusive thing.
Yeah. So that's kind of, so in 2012, they allowed the gay scouts in and then the gay leaders. And that was really what pushed people over the edge. My grandfather was super upset about that at the time. I didn't take as much notice because I just earned my eagle and I was kind of like, all right, I'm moving on. But he was right, shockingly.
Yeah.
And then in 2018, they decided to allow the girls in. And I remember I personally was just furious at that. And it's hard to verbalize in a way that doesn't make me sound sexist. So I'm gonna unfortunately sound a little sexist here for a minute. But it wasn't the reason I joined the Boy Scouts. But one of the things that I liked about the Boy Scouts as a young boy when I joined it was no girls were allowed. And I hadn't gone through puberty yet. I didn't really have any strong feeling about girls one way or the other. But it was like, oh, I'm a boy and I get to go to do this thing and the girls don't. And I like that. And I think that's true for a lot of young boys. And I suspect that's a large part of why they're finding it impossible to recruit scouts these days.
Yeah. Well, on the note of recruitment, I want to say it's really interesting because the premise behind all of this is inclusion. Mm-hmm. And it's the DEI movement, diversity, equity, inclusion. There's even a whole DEI space on the website. There's a new merit badge called Citizenship in, what is it?
Society.
The Society, which is
necessary to become an Eagle now.
Yeah, it's an Eagle required badge, and basically it's left open to be taught however whoever's teaching it wants to, which that's remarkable.
Let's see if I can find that. There is actually some stuff here now, but when I first was reading about it, it was saying they specifically didn't put any particular lessons in. There's nothing the scouts are particularly supposed to learn from this. It's basically just an opportunity for the scout leader or whoever's teaching that merit badge to pour whatever they like into the head of a future Eagle Scout.
I think that, again, on the topic of recruitment and attrition and inclusiveness, the idea has been let's be inclusive, and then maybe we can build our ranks by being more inclusive. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to read another little excerpt, and this is from our own Nate Jackson. You can read it at patriotpost.us. And he wrote on this whole situation, I believe it was yesterday on the 8th, May 8th. So he writes, "They foolishly miss or maliciously don't care that it will drive away others. Indeed, doubling the recruiting pool by adding girls didn't stop the BSA from losing overall membership. The real losers are the millions of young men who will miss out entirely on the valuable and manly skills taught through scouting. Women will lose too, because whether they acknowledge it or not, they want men with the values and character Scouts teaches. Put it all together, and inclusion suddenly doesn't feel very inclusive."
Yeah, I think he said it well, maybe best. The fact is that you want gender roles. Everyone wants gender roles. It's not a popular thing to say in society today, but it's true. You want the woman who's going to have the children, because the guys can't. That's a gender role.
Yeah.
You want the guy who's going to protect the woman, because when they're pregnant and or taking care of a young child, they frequently can't protect themselves. So you have to accept that there's a certain level of gender roles that are necessary for human existence.
Yeah, for human flourishing. I think
that's maybe the key, is the flourishing part.
Yeah, societies, Western societies in particular, have long understood the value of both genders. And they actually developed societies to protect that. It's only since, you could say, the feminist revolution that basically their concern in the way the narrative worked for them was women are secondary citizens, and we want to end that. We want women to be equal to men. Mm-hmm. In the sense that recognizing that men and women are equal as far as human beings, yes, of course.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they then therefore can all do the exact same roles.
Right.
There's a distinction of roles within the society. As you mentioned, women giving, they are the only ones that can birth children.
And we're not biologists, but we still know that.
Then we know that. That's true.
We're also not Supreme Court justices.
Yeah. We don't have knowledge like that. But that the West recognized this and protected it and sought to develop that element, not perfectly by any stretch, but in recognizing it, it also recognized that it needed what we like to call in popular lingo safe places. In other words, they recognized that there needed to be exclusive areas for men to be men and for women to be women. That the Western society had long recognized that. Now you had men's clubs, you had women's organizations. Women seemed to just still to this day naturally gravitate to that more easily than men do. Men almost have to have like it really clearly delineated, marked out, here's where you can go and be men.
Yeah.
With men, it was in the sports, but then, that there used to be sports clubs, like golf clubs. A lot of golf clubs used to be men's clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And then that became sexist at some point in time.
And certainly there were some that abused their privilege as men only. But
Sure, but the concept behind it wasn't inherently sexist.
Right.
It was seen as, you could argue that the idea in the past was sports is more for men, not for women. Therefore, sports clubs are more men's zones than women's zones. Okay. Women can play sports, obviously, and some are very good at sports, just like some men can play sports and are very good and some can't. But there was a value of a recognition of within these organizations, the men can learn how to be men and the women can learn how to be women.
Mm-hmm.
The Boy Scouts was intentional to saying, hey, let's start with the boys young. And I think you were saying part of that motivation was training them specifically for potential military.
Yeah. In the early 1900s, the need for physical human scouts running out in the terrain, camping out on their own, and then returning with information was very much still necessary in warfare. That quickly ended with World War I and World War II, but that was part of the initial drive to found the scouting movement.
Well, I think too, if you ended up with an Eagle Scout, that looked really good on your CV or your resume if you're headed into the military academies or anything like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, among the ranks of Eagle Scouts, there are astronauts, presidents, generals, inventors, scientists, all manner of great men.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has been a sign that you are capable of doing something that many people never reach the level of being able to do that. It's not that they can't, it's just that they haven't. And it's a sign that you have reached that level to be able to carry out a project. The Eagle Scout project is kind of the big proof of being an Eagle. And it requires you planning, carrying out, and organizing a project that benefits a community, usually.
It sets you apart. It's exclusive.
Right.
Yeah. But it's also exclusive in a way that you're not just selfish.
Well,
it teaches you to kind of say,
do a good turn daily.
Yeah.
Right. How do I benefit society?
Well,
right.
the
Slogan.
Yeah. The focus is how do we raise young men who are going to be leaders within society for the betterment of society? Mm-hmm. Those concepts, and starting young, because teaching people to be selfish, you don't even have to teach. That comes naturally.
Yeah.
Right.
No is mostly never taught to babies. They just learn that one on their own.
Yeah.
So the recognition that the young need to be taught to be responsible adults to benefit others, not just look out for their own interests, but the interests of others. That's going to look different. There's a lot of ways it looks the same irrespective of the gender, but there's also ways it's going to look different based upon the gender. We talked about there's still basic gender roles, like opening a door for a woman as a guy.
Yeah.
I mean, or the term ladies first, like for a meal or something like that. These are all recognition of gender roles and respect for the other sex. That's what they're taught. And there's an importance behind that. That's the way God made us. And what the modern culture is trying to do is destroy even the notion that there's any distinction between the sexes, even physically, which is ridiculous. But I think it's motivated by this rebellion against the natural order, that there are roles that, based upon something you didn't choose, we don't choose our sex, you're automatically have an obligation or a role to play in the natural order, and that this rebellion against that is being expressed in all these different ways. And one of the ways we're seeing with impact our society negatively is what's happened to the Boy Scouts. it started with a rebellion against the whole nature of how our sexuality is supposed to work.
And, why a rebellion against the fact that it's foolish to put homosexual men in charge of a group of young boys.
Right. At what point did the
Especially
scandal...
after the history.
Right.
Yeah.
When did that scandal finally erupt where...
It was in the 90s, wasn't it?
Well, there's been many since then. But yeah, I feel like my whole time in scouting, there was always those jokes. I never experienced anything untoward from any of my scout leaders.
Yeah.
But I mean, that exists, and that was obviously a problem. Now they've got all these...
Huge problem.
They've got all these trainings and other things in place to try to prevent it. But I think what's kind of a little bit ridiculous was you invited the fox into the hen house, almost instead of trying to rid the fox from the hen house, you deliberately invited the fox in the hen house, and not only invited the fox into the hen house, but you also invited the lambs into it as well.
Yeah. So on that topic, on that same article you read from earlier that Nate Jackson wrote, I'll just read a sentence here. Yes, the BSA, which is now an outdated term, I guess it's just SA.
It will be next year.
Yeah.
The 115th anniversary, I think.
Great way to celebrate that.
Yeah.
Yes, the BSA now has a pretty robust youth protection training that is required of any adult who spends time leading or camping. That's a good thing. But who do people think committed sexual abuse against boys? Hint, it's in the name, homosexual.
Yeah.
It's not the heterosexual leaders.
Yeah. Well, now you're going to have the problem with both because...
Well, now there's girls too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Any potential pedophiles, irrespective of their chosen proclivity, homosexuality or just straight, that you've made that target-rich environment that much richer.
Yeah.
The good news is, I guess, it's getting smaller, though.
Yeah, because the scouts are dying.
Well, on that note, this is my prediction. I believe the organization will be defunct in 10 years.
It's your prediction.
Yeah, I think that's likely. It may limp on a little bit past that, but I will kind of tack on, I think, for sure, before it dies, we will see boys and girls mixed in the same troop.
Yeah.
I'm certain of that.
I'm certain of it. Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
I mean, how much money is still involved?
There's a
within
lot.
Scouts.
I mean,
land ownership.
There's huge tracts of priceless land. Well, not priceless, but super valuable land.
In like several
Philmont.
states and stuff, right?
Yeah, like in Philmont, I don't know exactly what the. It could be a state practically. The land they
it's
have
large.
It's huge.
Did you guys ever go to any of the jamborees?
I never made it to a jamboree.
No, never went. I went to local camporees, which were, that would be multiple troops from a district.
Yeah, I went to summer camp Skymont most summers, which featured many different troops all there together. Yeah. And you just fun anecdote, you would win an award or lose privileges depending on how clean your camp was every day. So it was very important to clean up the camp. And that's one of the skills it teaches you. Yeah. It teaches you cleanliness, picking up after yourself, leave no trace.
Yeah. Clean is in scout law.
Yeah. And if you won, then you got there was always a cast iron skillet for every week or couple weeks of Skymont. And you could paint a pie slice of the skillet with your troop's number and something that your troop found interesting or funny. And so my troop did that. I think it was on June 7th, 2006. I remember.
You remember the day?
I remember because the day before was 666, and I was desperately trying to win for that one. And we didn't win that one.
Wow.
What a shame.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I found. I think I was in the Florida Keys, and I remember driving, you drive the road, and on one of the keys, there's like a beach that's owned by the Boy Scouts. It's like, this is the Boy Scout, and it's like, man, they got sweet land all over the place.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mostly like gifted by wealthy individuals who got to be Boy Scouts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they know how important that the organization is and how important it is for young men and building a strong nation and a strong future for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just on the people who were Boy Scouts earlier, we've mentioned that there were presidents. Just one president, actually, who was an Eagle Scout. Maybe others who were Scouts, but not Eagles.
Who is that?
Well, I'll give you a hint. He was never elected. Or he got into office without being elected anyhow. It was Gerald Ford.
Gerald Ford?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
So.
Neil Armstrong.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
mentioning, astronauts, as I said earlier. It makes me sad.
Yeah, because this is a once great organization.
Yeah. And it also makes me angry. And for a couple of reasons. It's clear that a lot of the reason this has happened is because of how the left operates, and that we have seen this happen to many cherished institutions. And it will continue to happen. It seems to be happening to the whole dang country right now. But they are not the only ones to blame. And I think it's very important to listen to this rebuke, because if we do not, the price will be so dear. It already has been.
Yeah.
The laziness of conservatives who have not fought hard enough for our cherished institutions has caused this. You're to blame. We're to blame.
Yeah. Good men have done nothing. I a little bit of mediating on that. I do think it took a long time to kind of figure out who the enemy was and how they were operating and what tactics are effective and not effective against them. So there's a little bit of mediation there. But yeah, for sure, if the conservative and or just traditional Boy Scouts from years past had kept their toes in and kept an eye on what was happening, they could have righted the ship.
One of the hardest things, I think, for conservatives when it comes to politics and culture is the progressive left is rarely honest. And, they'll use, like we said, the terminology DEI, which now everyone knows is basically code for Marxism. It's what it is. I mean, the words themselves, independent of it, sound fine, but they use this tactic of using deceptive language to confuse the issue, to muddy the waters rather than clear things up. They inject emotional anecdotes in lieu of clarity and truth, and just objective data to say this is good, this isn't, whatever it may be. Feelings are that impactful thing that people rely on way too much to make their decisions rather than what's true. So I think, I agree. I think why do we do what we do? We along with a lot of other conservatives are trying to stand up and fight for this country and for what's right and what's true and what's good, to be not only preserving agents, which I think is probably what we've gotten in trouble for. We just focus on preserving rather than developing. Yeah. I think we're good at the preserving stage. I think now we're stepping into the development stage. And so I think there's a lot of hope in that sense. Part of the things, though, you have to know, sometimes you just have to cut bait. And unfortunately, based upon what we're seeing happen with the Boy Scouts, I think back in 2013 when Trail Life USA, it was them saying, it's too far, we have to cut bait. No organization is perfect. There's going to be, even in its founding, potential elements that could lead to its downfall.
Of course.
And I think that within the Boy Scouts, they couldn't, when it was founded back in 1911, they would not have foreseen the whole mess of what our country's become regarding genders. I mean, they wouldn't have conceived of that. If they had conceived of it, could they have developed safeguards that would have prevented this from happening? Possibly.
I would say probably not.
Probably not. Possibly. It's hard to say. I think what's interesting when you look at, for example, Trail Life USA, they've leaned hard into the fact that we're going to be not just nominally Christian, we're going to be explicitly Christian.
Yeah. Their numbers are still not near.
They're at 60,000.
60,000.
Yes.
So not very near what Boy Scouts are.
But if you look at
diminished
but
state,
if you look at that same time span with the Boy Scouts, look, their numbers
Yeah.
have consistently grown every year.
Yeah, they've tripled since 2015, whereas the Boy Scouts since 2018 have halved.
Right. So that's one of those challenging things is, how do we respond when it gets so far down that there's no saving the organization? The fear I think we have, all of us have, is like, we don't want that to happen to the United States.
Yeah,
I know. I would say, for me personally, the Boy Scouts, that's my bellwether. And I've seen it coming for a long time.
Canary in the coal mine for you.
It is. And I have seen it coming for a long time. And of course, this is inevitable. But then in spite of that, when it happens, it's still it's a blow.
Yeah, it's upsetting.
But I think for everybody's going to have their different moment, their moment of, this is bad. This is dangerous. We are going in a very bad direction and we have got to stop it.
Yeah. For me, that moment with the Scouts specifically was when they announced in 2017 or 2017, I think, was when it was announced. 2019 was when it took place, that girls were going to be able to join the Boy Scouts. And I made my voice heard. I got flack and pushback from people saying I was sexist because I didn't want girls in the Boy Scouts. But I guess the core argument I can make is this. If you can't hold true to your own name as an organization, what on earth can you hold true to?
Yeah, what is your identity?
Right.
I mean,
you've destroyed all trust
Yeah.
in the organization when you betray your own name.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the whole thing, like literally, when you say the Scout oath, on my honor.
Yeah.
That's how it starts.
Yeah.
Where is your honor?
well,
Yeah, well,
If you can't honor your own name.
I think I'll go ahead and say the whole Scout oath. You can correct me if I get something wrong. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, to obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight.
Right.
What does morally straight mean?
what does honor mean?
What does honor mean? But to kind of illustrate the idea that they don't know what morally straight is in the Scouts anymore, I was reading this article about the former senior vice president, deputy general counsel, and chief diversity officer who kind of implemented a lot of this stuff starting in 2017. She's now left the Boy Scouts, but her big win was the Citizenship and Society Merit
So she just
Badge.
came in, threw a bomb, and left. Thank you.
And she says, let's see if I can find that paragraph. I met volunteers who said, "You don't have any scouting background?" And I say, "No, can you help walk me through it?" And it's good, I guess, to try to learn about the organization you're joining, but the idea of you have no experience, you have no knowledge of what the heck this organization is about, and then you come in and you radically change it to fit your own DEI desires, which is what she did. Because this merit badge, Citizenship and Society, when you look that up on the scouting website, it's scouting.org/merit badges/ oh, they actually changed it. Scouting.org/about/diversity, equity, inclusion. And that takes you to the new Citizenship and Society merit badge. So they're not hiding that this is about DEI.
Yeah. Did she come in after the change regarding allowing girls in?
It looks like it was at the same time.
At the same time, they bring her in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, as you read through this article, it's just full of DEI dribble.
Yeah.
And, she talks about only 3 elements of the Scout law. The only 3 elements she mentions are kindness, friendliness, and respect. What was the other one she mentions? Sorry.
Courteous, maybe.
Courtesy. Yeah. Courtesy.
Yeah. From the Scout law.
Yes. So that's all she cares about. Kindness, friendliness, and courtesy.
Because Scout law is trustworthy, loyal,
helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. So reverent implies that, and the Boy Scouts kind of tiptoed around being Christian for a while, but they always understood that the majority of the Scouts are Christian, and that reverent means reverence to God.
Yes.
And that's what is understood. But if you're supposed to, as she says many times, make a space where everyone is welcome and everyone is included, how are you supposed to be morally straight or any kind of discerning?
Yeah, it's
the same stuff as taking
open
these
borders,
understood just standards and obfuscating them and confusing them.
Yeah.
And intentionally sowing discord and intentionally sowing confusion so that nobody knows what anything is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an agenda that has been about targeting those pillars of society that are a threat to the new morality. That's what's happened.
Yeah.
They've targeted so many different things. They targeted the Boy Scouts. They targeted the Boy Scouts to effectively eviscerate what they were. And they won. Then they've succeeded. I mean, like Sterling says, it will limp along, and it will now be praised and upheld as a paragon of a once toxic culture that saw the light.
Mm-hmm. Which I think that's a good point, because it used to be praised as a paragon, right?
Yeah.
All the way up into the 90s, even the early 2000s, it was still being a Boy Scout, being an Eagle Scout. That's a good, positive, virtuous thing to do. And then for a while, it became pretty unpopular. And now it's popular again. And I think a good litmus test for if you're holding true to your own values is if the society changes around you and the attitude the society has for you does not change, then you're the one who's changing. You're just matching, you're conforming to the society instead of staying true to your own values.
Yep. Yeah. Great point, Sterling.
Yeah. Well, we could go on, and there's some more inflammatory things we could say, but maybe we don't have to say them.
So what, I mean, jokingly, I said this to you guys earlier. What is the new Boy Scout motto? It's not always be prepared.
It's inclusive.
Be inclusive.
Be inclusive. Yes. Yes. Before long, it'll be gay, probably. Yeah. Be an ally daily, that kind of thing.
Oh my gosh.
So
the Boy Scouts is dead.
Yep. Officially, I mean, they're changing their name. There's no remnant of the words Boy Scouts left.
I could just cry.
Yeah, it's very upsetting. And, when I see girls in the Boy Scout uniform, that upsets me. Not because I don't think girls should go out and camp and learn how to make fires and take care of themselves in the wild, but because it's the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
It's for boys. Girls shouldn't be in it.
How many organizations exist that are exclusive to boys anymore? I mean,
next to none, maybe none.
Maybe Trail Life, I guess.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
There's probably a few.
So explicitly Christian organizations is probably the only place left.
Well, same for girls too. I mean, where do these organizations exist that help the two different sexes understand what it means to be that in a very dynamic way? Too often it's simplistically put, girls are this, boys are this. Mm-hmm. Culture does that because culture has to use, what do we call it?
Stereotypes.
Heuristics?
Yeah, stereotypes, heuristics, shorthand for just when you're discussing it. But the fact of the matter is both are very dynamic. Both sexes are very dynamic and they complement each other.
Yes.
But in order to complement each other well, they need to develop as their own well. And what we've done as a culture is attack that idea because there seems to be this rejection or rebellion against the notion, and I think it's really ultimately it's a rebellion against God and how He's created us. Absolutely. And so what this is an outworking of is saying we're not going to be how God's designed us. We want to be our own God, and so we're going to try to rebel against every kind of element that He has put into His creation that define us outside of we defining ourselves. And I think that's really the spirit of it. And so when you're like, if you're a parent and you have, kids that you're raising and you think about like, how do I raise them well? And you do your best as you and your wife do, but there's also a broader culture. You have your church, but even beyond that, within civic culture, which I would say is what the Boy Scouts was. It was a part of civic culture.
It was.
And you're trying to train up kids in civic culture. We have schools, but our schools have failed us in a lot of ways. The public schools, they've bought the whole kind of no distinction between the sex, almost hook, line, and sinker now because you got girl spaces being invaded by boys claiming to girls to be girls, to play in their sports teams or use their restrooms or all this stuff. Yeah. And it's so damaging. And, I'm hopeful that there's a point in which enough people say enough and start standing up and saying, no, we need these spaces returned. We need to appreciate them. And, if you're a man and you're not allowed into a woman's space and you're angry about that, then you need to go get your head examined. You need to get yourself figured out because that's ridiculous.
Yeah. And just another point in the same vein, if you train boys and girls exactly equally all their lives, then they're both going to be more mediocre.
Yeah.
If you train boys to be good at the things that boys are traditionally better at and girls to be good at the things that girls are traditionally better at, they're both going to be better than mediocre at both of those categories of things. The girls will be better at the more girly things and the boys will be better at the more boy-y things than if you train them both equally. Then you're just getting, something mediocre. And that's not ideal. Yeah. Mediocrity is not the ideal. Yeah. And that is what we're pushing everything towards. We're pushing everything to mediocrity instead of excellence.
Well, that's what that's what equity tries to do. Everybody's the same. No, I mean, I think we have to be careful here. We're not saying that. I think within the world of work in general, much of the jobs out there can be done by either sex really well. Doctors, lawyers, these things. They're not sex exclusive types of jobs. Where maybe in the past one of the problems we had is we saw the jobs as too sex exclusive. So I think that there is a recognition of we need to be aware of that problem, but at the same time, there are distinctions in regards to the sexes, in regards to how we relate to each other, even in work, that matter. When we don't, we just invite problems like crazy.
Yep. Yeah. When you refuse, you can, it's a great quote that I just saw somewhere. You can choose to ignore reality, but you can't choose to ignore the consequences of choosing to ignore reality.
Yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah, they don't. The consequences are not something you can choose not to have to suffer,
right?
Or enjoy.
Yeah,
yeah.
If you make good decisions, I always like that phrase. What now? It just escaped me. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Yes, we're playing a lot of stupid games right now.
We are, and the prizes are going to be not fun.
No, they won't. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, this is a very
upbeat,
uplifting
happy. We hope you're just taking this away with just a spirit of like, whoo, I'm glad I listened to that.
Yeah, buddy.
Well, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
We're not being defeatist here. I think that's the temptation.
It is.
Well, we're not defeatist in that we're not giving up.
No.
But we have been defeated here. The Boy Scouts are a loss.
You lose a battle, but that doesn't mean you stop fighting the war.
Right. Exactly. I think that's a good note to end on.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. This has been the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew. We're brought to you by the Patriot Post, which is the oldest conservative news digest on the web. It's right and it's free. Be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about us. Bye.
Bye.
See you guys.